The first scream didn't come from the passengers. It came from behind the cockpit door. Seconds later, the aircraft lurched hard enough to spill drinks across the cabin. Nervous whispers spread from row to row as frightened eyes searched for answers that no one could give. Somewhere beyond that locked door, the captain had collapsed. The first officer was struggling to keep control, and more than 200 lives were suddenly hanging by a thread. Most people froze in fear. One woman didn't. She quietly unbuckled her seatbelt, her heartbeat racing for the first time in years. She had sworn never to touch an aircraft's controls again after a single mission destroyed her career and erased her name from the military. But as the jet shuddered through the sky, she realized there was no one else left who could save it. What happened over the next 40 minutes would leave veteran F-22 pilots speechless the moment they heard one forgotten call sign echo across the radio. Before we begin, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Just 3 hours earlier, no one at the airport had given Olivia Carter a second glance. Dressed in a faded navy jacket and carrying a single worn backpack, she looked like any other traveler rushing through the terminal. She kept her eyes low, skipped the crowded coffee shop, and chose a quiet corner near the gate where no one would ask questions. That was exactly how she preferred life, now simple, unnoticed, and far away from the person she used to be. Her last-minute ticket to Denver wasn't for business or vacation. It was because her older brother had called before sunrise with news that their father had suffered a serious stroke. Every minute mattered, and this was the earliest flight she could find. As passengers laughed, scrolled through their phones, and complained about boarding delays, Olivia quietly watched the aircraft outside. Without realizing it, her eyes instinctively tracked every movement of the jet, every engine sound, every turn. Toward the runway, some habits never disappear, no matter how hard you try to bury them. 4 years earlier, Olivia Carter wasn't sitting in airport terminals pretending to be invisible. She was one of the Air Force's youngest and most respected experimental pilots, trusted to fly aircraft that most people wouldn't dare start. Fellow pilots joked that if a machine had even the smallest chance of making it home, Olivia would find it. That's how she earned the call sign Phantom 1. It wasn't because she flew fast, it was because she always seemed to bring impossible missions back from the edge. Then one flight changed everything. During a classified test mission, a brand new flight control system failed without warning. With a residential town directly below, Olivia made a split-second decision. Instead of ejecting immediately, she stayed with the aircraft long enough to steer it away from innocent families before escaping at the last possible second. She survived, her reputation didn't. An investigation blamed her for waiting too long to eject, ignoring the hidden equipment failure that caused the disaster. Within weeks, her wings were gone. Her career was over, and the legendary call sign Phantom 1 disappeared from military radio forever. Or so everyone believed. The gentle hum of the engines had almost lulled Olivia to sleep when one sound shattered the calm. It wasn't loud enough for most passengers to notice, but years of military flying had trained her ears to recognize the difference between ordinary noise and the sound of something going terribly wrong. A few seconds later, the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a doctor, nurse, or any medical professional on board, please press your call button immediately." The announcement was Kambutua. Olivia heard the strain hiding beneath every word. Then the aircraft drifted ever so slightly to one side before correcting itself. Most people blamed turbulence. Olivia knew better. Someone in the cockpit was fighting the airplane. She gripped the armrests as another subtle roll passed through the cabin. Memories she had spent 4 years burying came rushing back all at once. She told herself to stay seated. Commercial first officers were trained for emergencies. Then the jet lurched again, longer this time. Olivia slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. If her instincts were right, waiting even one more minute could cost hundreds of lives. The flight attendant blocked Olivia's path, her face pale with fear. "Ma'am, you have to remain seated." Olivia met her eyes without raising her voice. "I'm a former Air Force experimental pilot. If your captain is down, every second matters. Please, take me to the cockpit." Something in her calm confidence made the attendant hesitate before nodding. The cockpit door swung open. Chaos waited on the other side. The captain lay unconscious on the floor while another crew member desperately checked his pulse. The young first officer gripped the controls with trembling hands, sweat running down his forehead as warning lights flashed across the instrument panel. "You can actually fly this?" he asked. Olivia's eyes swept across the gauges in a single glance. "I can." The first officer swallowed hard. "We've lost partial hydraulic pressure on the left side. The crosswinds ahead are getting worse, and the autopilot kept fighting the controls." Without another word, Olivia lowered herself into the captain's seat. Her fingers wrapped around the control column for the first time in 4 years. The aircraft resisted immediately. She took one steady breath. "I have control." For the first time since the emergency began, the cockpit fell completely silent. With the aircraft finally steady, Olivia contacted air traffic control. "Mayday? Mayday? This is flight 218. Captain incapacitated. Partial hydraulic failure, requesting immediate priority landing." The controller responded instantly, clearing every aircraft out of her path. But Olivia wasn't finished. "I also need any military aircraft monitoring this frequency." The first officer looked at her in surprise. "Why the military?" "Because someone up there has flown aircraft that don't behave the way they're supposed to." Moments later, a calm voice broke through the radio. "Flight 280, this is Falcon Flight. 2 F-22s are nearby. How can we assist?" Olivia reached for the transmit button. For a brief moment, her thumb hovered in the air. She had promised herself that name belonged to the past. Then she whispered into the radio. "Falcon Flight, this is Phantom 1. Requesting escort and crosswind support. Silence, not static. Not interference. Pure silence." Inside the cockpit, the first officer frowned. Then another voice, but turned older, slower, almost unbelieving. "Say your call sign again?" Olivia closed her eyes for a heartbeat. "This is Phantom 1. The response didn't come immediately. When it finally did, every word carried the weight of disbelief. "My God." "Phantom 1, we thought you were gone." Within minutes, 2 F-22 fighters appeared through the cockpit windows, gliding into position like silent guardians on either side of the struggling airliner. "Phantom 1, we've got visual on you," the lead pilot reported. "We'll stay with you all the way down." Olivia didn't look away from the instruments. "Copy that. Feed me every wind change below 10,000 feet. Already working on it." The fighter pilots began calling out updated crosswinds every few seconds, while air traffic control cleared an empty corridor straight to the runway. Inside the cockpit, the tension grew heavier with every mile. The damaged hydraulic system responded slower each time Olivia corrected the aircraft, forcing her to anticipate every movement before it happened. The first officer stared in amazement. "How are you staying this calm?" Without taking her eyes off the horizon, Olivia answered quietly, "I'm not calm." She tightened her grip on the controls as another violent gust shoved the aircraft sideways. "I'm just refusing to let fear fly this airplane." The F-22 leader smiled beneath his oxygen mask. "That's exactly why legends never really disappear." Ahead, the runway finally came into view, but the hardest part was still waiting. The runway stretched across the windshield like the finish line of an impossible race. "Altitude, 1,000 feet, the first officer announced, his voice shaking. Outside, fierce crosswinds slammed into the aircraft again, forcing the nose away from the centerline. Every correction demanded strength the damaged hydraulic system could barely provide. The control column felt heavier with each passing second, but Olivia refused to fight the airplane. Instead, she listened to it, anticipating its movements before they happened. Wind shifting left. 25 knots, the F-22 pilot warned over the radio. "I see it," Olivia replied calmly. At 500 feet, the cabin fell eerily silent. Even the passengers seemed to sense that everything depended on the next few moments. 300, 200. The jet suddenly dipped as another powerful gust struck. The first officer grabbed the edge of his seat. Olivia reacted instantly, applying smooth, deliberate corrections instead of panicked ones. The aircraft steadied, aligned perfectly with the runway, and seconds later the main landing gear struck the pavement with a firm, confident thud. A heartbeat of silence followed. Then reverse thrust roared. The aircraft slowed, 80 knots. 60, 40. When it finally rolled to a complete stop, the cockpit remained frozen. Behind them, the cabin erupted into thunderous applause, relieved tears, and grateful cheers. Against every prediction, Phantom 1 had brought them all home. As the cabin doors opened, paramedics rushed inside, racing past grateful passengers toward the unconscious captain. Fire crews surrounded the aircraft while emergency lights painted the runway in flashing shades of red and blue. Olivia quietly stepped off the jet, expecting to disappear into the crowd like she had planned that morning. Instead, several uniformed officers were waiting. At their center stood a silver-haired Air Force general. "You must be Olivia Carter." She nodded cautiously. The general extended her hand. "I've wanted to meet you for a long time." Olivia frowned. "I thought the Air Force forgot about me." "We didn't," the general replied. "Some people buried the truth, but they couldn't erase it." She handed Olivia a sealed folder. "We reopened your accident investigation months ago. The original report left out critical flight data. Our engineers found multiple system failures that proved you didn't cause that crash." Olivia stared at the folder, unable to speak. The burden she had carried for 4 long years suddenly felt lighter. The general smiled gently. "Today didn't restore your honor, Olivia. It simply reminded the world that it never should have been taken away." An hour later, Olivia finally walked into the hospital room where her father sat beside her recovering mother. The moment she stepped inside, her father stood up and wrapped her in a silent hug. "You made it," he whispered. She smiled. So did everyone else. For the first time in years, those words didn't remind her of what she had lost. They reminded her of what she had protected. As her mother drifted back to sleep, Olivia stepped into the quiet hallway and looked through the window at the evening sky. High above the city, a pair of tiny lights crossed the clouds before disappearing into the distance. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from the Air Force. "Captain Olivia Carter, your record is being formally cleared. We would be honored to discuss your return to flight duty when you're ready." A tear slipped down her cheek as she read it again. 4 years earlier, they had taken away her wings, but they had never taken away the pilot. She looked toward the sky one last time and smiled. Some heroes aren't remembered because they never fall. They're remembered because, after losing everything, they find the courage to rise again when hundreds of lives depend on them. And somewhere above the clouds, the call sign Phantom 1 was no longer a forgotten memory. It was flying home.